We've been asking you on our Twitter page is related to this special month as we begin to commemorate the Women's Month. Would really like to share with us the significant challenges that you have had to face as a woman living here in South Africa. So over the past few years, we've seen a number of events where women really stood up to fight for what they believed was right and fought against what they believed was oppressive to them. We've invited now in studio this afternoon Keitumetse Fatimata Moutloatse. She is a gender feminist activist and the chairperson of the Black Women Caucus. Hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us.
Melissa.
So, happy Women's Month.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I welcome that.
Thank you so much indeed. But is there a reason really to celebrate? We know that, of course, we should commemorate and remember the 1956 women. But if you look at the state of affairs now, the challenges that women are facing in South Africa, do we really have a reason to be celebrating this month?
Of course we do. I think, firstly, let's understand that today marks the 1-year anniversary of the total Shutdown march, which saw thousands of South African women take to the streets against gender-based violence. A year later, so much has been achieved through this political action, right? We've seen how the president himself has seen gender-based violence as a societal crisis, right? And I think the biggest thing we need to do is to really shift away from always, our focus on what's going wrong, but actually look at what's going right. And we've seen that in the past year, through collective power of women, that we're really able to advance the causes of women in this country.
Yeah, let's just focus a bit on the positives, as you say. What's going right for us as women in South Africa? We've been hearing horrific stories. You made mention of the Presidential Gender Summit that took place last year in November. The stories that came out of that summit, I literally just wanted to switch off my television. I just couldn't take it. But that's just a bit of what women go through in South Africa. But what are those positives?
I mean, the issue of gender-based violence in this country is a crisis, right? It's been a crisis since the test of time. But also we've been able to see what, societal consciousness does, right? The raising of consciousness around gender-based violence. I'm not saying that the numbers have gone down, but I am saying that the conversation's happening in the most important rooms, right? I am saying that the people of this country are seeing the need for us to really organize around gender-based violence. Looking now, we've got our interim structure that's really doing some work on the National Strategic Plan against gender-based violence. Those are some of the stories that will never come to center stage, right? Because they're about women, right? We also see there's been campaigns throughout the year, women organizing in several spaces, demanding several things, from a feminist government to the 24 demands. These struggles still go unnoticed, but just because they're not on TV doesn't mean they're not happening.
Yes, indeed. So, as you said, today coincidentally marks the first anniversary of the total shutdown march. Let's just talk a bit about that. Bare matla ke kopano ke matla in Setswana. So, we saw women really coming together, trying to fight the scourge of violence in South Africa. And as you said at the end, government heeded their call. The president listened. The summit was held. There's even a unit within the presidency that looks into this issue to develop that particular plan that we made mention of. So it looks like finally we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel.
Of course. I mean, I must say I would like to, extend congratulations to the organizers of the total shutdown movement, right, who have worked tirelessly to see some of the concessions that have come out, right? And of course, as I was saying earlier on, the issue around what kind of issues do we choose to put on TV is quite important, right? I mean, for too long, the media has played a critical role in painting South African women in particular as perpetual victims. And that's not the case, right? There are women organizing in different spaces, from the private sector to civil society, even within governance, right? Women are challenging, right? And sometimes the challenge will not get expression, and that's okay, but that doesn't mean the work isn't being done. Looking a year later from the total shutdown, I mean, not all 24 demands have been met, but we do see a lot of concession and progress. I think for me the most important thing is that we're able to bring something that has always been left to and we've brought it to center stage to say, actually, South Africa, we're tired of being killed and raped on a daily basis. And I think more than anything else, our shift into Women's Month should not really be focusing on women's rights, because women's rights are human rights. And this month we should be really placing focus on how do we make South Africa see the rest see our rights, right? Our rights to live, our rights to dignity, our right to safety as a basic human right, and not just a group of women who are making too much noise or who are problematic.
Yeah, indeed. Previously on this show, we had victims of gender-based violence who came to the studio, but of course are now living at a shelter here in Johannesburg, and they were basically saying, look, it's not that we were not aware that our partners were abusive, but the socioeconomic status that we found ourselves in made us stay, irregardless of the situation or the circumstances that we lived in. But some people are saying that we're starting to see women coming out now to talk about this and to leave their abusive relationships.
I mean, I think the position of women in this country, right, looking more from a gender perspective, gender-based violence lens, I don't think it can be separated from anything else, like from all the economic processes. I mean, right now we've just heard the latest announcement on the unemployment rates in this country, and the reality is that majority of those numbers are women, are black young women. And what does that say? So the conditions we find ourselves in this country make it rife for gender-based violence to exist. So when we come forth and say we want an end to gender-based violence, we're not just talking about physical and sexual violence. We're talking about economic violence, political violence, social violence, all that find expression in our households.
No, you're making an important point that we had a guest yesterday analyzing the numbers from Stats SA on the poverty line. And part of what the report was saying is that us as females, we find ourselves much into poverty more than our male counterparts. So this still talks to the disparities and the inequalities that still exist in South Africa.
Of course, and this is why a feminist government is so important, right? And this is why we do the work of feminist education and feminist consciousness building, because we also need to break some of the patriarchal stereotypes that make it okay for women to depend on their intimate partners as a source of income. So in many a times, and if you speak to these victims of gender-based violence, there's a high levels of disempowerment. Not to say that women aren't educated, not to say that women aren't skilled, right? Or that we're lazy. It's just that the way society is structured, the social fabric of society makes it okay for women to depend on their partners as a form of survival. And I mean, we can't hide away from that, right? You look at your unemployment rates, as I said, we still make a bulk of that number. And if you look at our informal sectors, right? Sectors that are considered your service delivery sectors, right? We still have a bulk of women in those precarious living, working in those conditions. So for us, we're also saying that if we're addressing gender-based violence, not only are we addressing gender-based violence, we're also addressing the way women engage with the economy, which has a direct effect on our livelihoods.
But how do we sort of try to shift their mindset and their mentality that women are supposed to depend on men? I mean, this is not just something that happened to the previous generations. We see it now. We talk of women who depend on blessers, for example, people who blesses them with everything. And really, so it looks like it's not going to stop anytime soon. How do we shift that particular mindset?
I think, Balisa, your question is quite fair and unfair at the same time, right? Because you're placing an unnecessary burden on women to rectify a system that has been designed to subjugate them.
That is why I say that it's been happening for quite some time.
Of course.
Are we going to be able to rectify it?
Of course. So I think the question we should be asking is what the rest of society is doing in relation to women to addressing this issue. Because I think it's also quite unfair for us to think that women are not trying to rectify the system, rather instead dismantle the system. We're doing that in our different spaces, right? The problem is that we cannot keep viewing women's issues as women's issues and not societal issues. The moment we see more input, more buy-in from society, the more we see a change in these structures that are so problematic. That's why we say the issue of gender-based violence is really not just about women being raped and killed by their intimate partners. We're asking for society to look inward, the ways in which we choose to raise our children, the practices within our households, our schooling system. All of these are critical institutions that pave the way and are perpetuants of gender-based violence in this country. Yeah. So to answer your question, are we ever going to be able to rectify this issue? Definitely. Who's going to do it? All of us.
All of us. It's a societal problem, and it needs a societal approach. So very quickly, you've had initiatives such as What has the response been like?
I think, oh wow, I think
against you,
no, also all through, right through, right? And sometimes means to start within the household, means to start within the self, right? Means to address issues that you yourself have internalized and made the norm, right? But when looking at campaigns like the Shais Fuba, which really was calling for a demand to a feminist government, right? The response was amazing because it was quite telling that the reality of the matter is majority of the voting population in this country who happen to be women don't trust these political parties. And the reason why they don't trust these political parties is precisely because women's issues are reduced to a footnote on a manifesto. And we're also saying, and I think something that came out really strongly from all these initiatives, is that we live a gendered experience. There is no women's issue, it is a gendered experience. And if you're going to talk to me about water and sanitation, you need to talk to me about water and sanitation from a gendered perspective, and not just water and sanitation from a peripheral point of view. So in terms of response from these initiatives, they've been great. Yeah. But I think now the most important thing is to do is how do we consolidate feminist power? And you'll tell that I'm quite deliberate with the word feminist and not women, right? Because feminist is calling for a direct attack on all systems of oppression, right? And we know right now in South Africa, the biggest threat is capitalism. This is why we have the highest rates of unemployment in the past 11 years. It's not by accident, right? It's really not. And so feminist organizing, feminist consciousness building, right, says that we are trying to equip women with the tools and skills to address these issues from their households, from their communities. I, for one, am not trying to come as a messiah, right? I don't think I'm the chosen one. But what I will do is educate the women the best ways I can. Equip them and say, Basadi, it's got to be,
yeah. Well, Keitumetse, thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you so much.